The daughters were arguing loudly. It got to the point of shouting. And then the sound of broken glass, harsh as it was heard. The daughters were frightened into silence.
I don't know if this can be categorized as scary stories or supernatural. But the story is pretty creepy, I think. And why? Let everyone decide for themselves.
It so happened that once I was present at the division of the inheritance. A good grandmother lived in our village and left her 2 daughters a house. I went to that house as a neighbor to say goodbye to the old lady. She was a good person. For some reason she liked to make kissel and give it to the whole street. It was delicious, by the way. I had never tasted anything like it before. And at that very moment my sisters began to argue with me, for some reason, at my deathbed, about which of them loved my mother more and who should have the house by right. It was not a very pleasant sight, I can tell you. The relatives were not particularly fond of each other, and the argument was heated. And it was because of what? The house is sound, 2-story and in the expensive place. But here's the unfortunate thing, and the will of the grandmother did not indicate who it should go. The daughters were arguing loudly, and the husbands were standing around, ready to start a fight. As an independent person, of course, I am not particularly pleased to hear all this. After all, each of my daughters claims that she loved her mother more than anyone else. But as a neighbor, I know that while my grandmother was alive, her daughters very rarely came to see her. Except to leave her grandchildren while they went on vacation to Turkey. So they argued and argued. It had already come to the point of shouting. And then the sound of shattered glass, harsh as it was heard. All at once my daughters shut up and frightened look around. I, too, flinched in surprise. We started to look around to see what was broken. I saw it was my grandmother's photo, her still young, beautiful husband with 2 little girls in her arms. The glass of the frame broke, and the picture itself was crumpled by an invisible hand. It was so neat that only the grandmother's image was damaged. But we all looked closely, and it turned out that this jam looks like a woman frowning menacingly. Honestly, it creeped me out. It began to feel like I could feel someone else's invisible presence. But after this misunderstanding, the daughters' argument about the house ended by itself, and the house was quiet. Only heard the floorboards in the hall mysteriously rattling for some reason. Well, I bowed at the waist to my now former neighbor, and hurried away from the house. It was frightening for me to stay there. I don't know how things developed further, but eventually my daughters sold the house and split the money. But the new tenants turned out to be good people. They have a big family with many children. Their kids often come into my yard too. So they told me that sometimes the house smells like fresh sour cream in the early morning. And the smallest one, and blurted out that Grandma Agatha often keeps an eye on him when the older ones are late for school. The curious thing was that everyone called my neighbor Agatha. There you go.
Subscribe to the channel. There will be many more interesting things.